The premise of the swapper appears simple enough at first. You create clones of yourself and swap direct control among them to reach special objects that are seemingly out of your grasp. Every single puzzle in the game is just about reaching a goodie at the opposite end of a room, and like a lot of other abstract puzzle platformers, that's really all there is to how it presents itself. The strength in puzzle games like the swapper is how the premise leads to emergent situations that manage to educate and challenge you about a system that's initially beyond your comprehension, or possibly even your imagination. And the swapper hits all the right notes. It introduces new abilities and obstructions gradually but steadily in a way that keeps puzzles interesting and challenging, and it develops a near-perfect difficulty curve that leaves a little room for human foolishness without actually dumbing down any gameplay elements. It's easily one of the best puzzlers that independent gaming has to offer, and its equal commitment to its world and aesthetic makes it something even more fascinating. The game puts you in possession of a strange gun that, in the words of one character, is able to swap souls. You can create 4 copies of yourself anywhere in your line of sight and swap direct control between them. Each copy follows your basic movements like running and jumping, but only the one you have selected can aim and fire the gun. The game prevents you from simply cloning yourself all the way to the end of a puzzle with a variety of obstructions. Certain colored lights represent fields where you can't spawn copies or swap between them, and some puzzles place further restrictions on the number of copies you can make. The puzzles are constructed out of little sub-objectives. You have to get certain copies to stand on pressure plates to open doors, you have to get your copies to stand on the ceiling, or you have to figure out how to circumvent the swapper inhibiting fields. All of these simple, tiny elements sound a little underwhelming at first, but because of the crafty level design, they all add to a much greater collage. The puzzles range from basic tutorials to seemingly impossible situations, and in every case, there's something genius made up of understandable but incredibly versatile components. Puzzles are unlocked in waves, normally of 3 or 4, and each wave can be completed in any order. To unlock a new wave, you have to collect a certain number of orbs found at the ends of puzzles, but you don't need to complete every single puzzle until the end of the game. Over time, the swapper does face you with elements that lead into more challenging stuff, and the puzzles definitely become tougher as you progress, but the overall difficulty curve is fairly loose. Most puzzles aren't designed to be completed with specific knowledge and abilities from the ones that came before them, but rather with experience and insight into the game mechanics, and the game's lenient means of progression really fits that system. Each puzzle in a single wave focuses on a variation on an overarching theme that isn't necessarily any more or less difficult than the other variations around it. It's just something different. But at the same time, you learn from each puzzle. You'll expand your awareness of what's possible with your special gun. If you leave a tough puzzle and come back to it after solving a few others, things will start to click when they hadn't before. Even though each puzzle offers something unique, none of them are derivative. You'll get new ideas and you'll feel ridiculously accomplished when you figure everything out. The only real criticism I have toward the gameplay is that its potential exceeds its scope. What it has to offer is easily on the same level of intricacy as other fantastic puzzle games like Braid and Vessel. But looking at Braid and Vessel, they embrace every little thing they introduce and so thoroughly explore all the situations their mechanics can get you into. The swapper has you traveling in zero gravity, or building up momentum from long falls, for instance. Things like those suggest great opportunities for new puzzle elements, but they only occur in segments that transition you from one set of puzzles to the next. I would have liked to encounter enemies, or try to swap with other people, or just try some puzzles in the vacuum of space. All these possibilities that the game's mechanics connote lead me to hope for an expansion pack or sequel that will tackle bigger ideas, even though the game's story probably wouldn't lend itself well to one. The swapper also lands some accomplishments that aren't quite so common among games of its ilk. For one thing, it tells a very interesting story. It feels like something out of a science fiction magazine where I wouldn't say it's all that challenging, but it's still speculative, charming, and incredibly strange. It deals with the discovery of a lost alien civilization and the implications of a gun that lets people swap their brains around. It's not very well delivered since you learn pretty much everything from diary entries just dotted between completely arbitrary puzzle rooms, but it's very cleverly written with wonderful character development and a fascinating final act. The entire atmosphere of the game is something amazing too. Every element, the story, the visuals, the sound design, and the environment, everything lends itself to the feeling that you're isolated on some kind of stellar frontier. The Swapper is certainly no horror game, but its setting, tone, and backstory bring to mind some fantastic company like System Shock 2, Penumbra, and Dead Space. While at some points a bit of camp does seep out, it's a very dark story about the unknown that works in tandem with the world to completely captivate you. The game is set on a space station in the distant future, and the art design reflects this faraway setting with a marriage between obviously human structures and a very alien-feeling architectural style and use of materials. Along with the vivid use of color and lighting, it makes the place feel almost as if it's alive. Perhaps the element most convincing of this idea, though, is the sound. All the ambient noises and music fit just perfectly in the environment, with the hum of lights and emergency functions echoing through the ship, or a soft piano melody playing in a lounge sort of area. I've seen quite a few people recommending the Swapper because of its aesthetic and story alone, and while I find that kind of recommendation for such a fantastic game is misguided, the tremendous effort put into the feel of the game deserves high praise and definitely adds to the experience. The Swapper is one of the most finely polished, cleverly designed puzzle games out there. It's smart and challenging, and it's focused on a unique set of mechanics that takes you deeper than you'd first imagine. Its progression system and difficulty curve keep it inviting but manage to take nothing away from the really hard puzzles that it introduces later on. The writing and atmosphere add to the game in a way that very few other puzzle games can boast as well, giving it a significantly greater appeal. If you buy it simply because of its aesthetic, you may just find the puzzle gamer that you never knew existed inside you all along, crying out for more by the end. And if you start out just interested in the puzzles, you'll find yourself deep inside something greater. It's thoroughly enjoyable on every front, packed with intricate challenge and a charming science fiction world. Whether you're heavily experienced with puzzle games or you've just started to go on the lookout for the right one to pop your cherry, it's a game you simply can't go wrong with.